Hey guys, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox here with another album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Turquoisedeath record, C'est Bueno. Like many others, 2022's Paint the World Blue EP was my personal first experience with Turquoisedeath and his particular brand of drum and bass influenced music, and that was also a pretty great moment of discovery for myself and many others. That EP just barely didn't make my best EPs of the year list, despite the fact that I actually didn't talk about it on my channel at the time for whatever reason, mainly because I'm dumb. The ability demonstrated on that particular EP and other EPs that Turquoisedeath has put out at that to create these atmospheric soundscapes without being willing to give up the kind of energy that the contemporary breakbeat sounds that he participates in, while just keeping that all together in one tight, confined package, it was immediately very impressive. And that's really the appeal of Turquoisedeath, that appeal towards people like myself that really want to find that sort of happy medium, that middle ground between off-the-wall enthusiasm in their electronic music while also remaining a little bit more ambience-focused. The point that I'm trying to make is that I personally had a lot of anticipation for this album because, it was the first solo full-length LP from Turquoisedeath, the first time that he would get a chance to just completely go on his own, do his own thing, take a full-length creative direction, journey, whatever you want to call it, and just run with whatever he felt like running with. I was really excited to hear this album the second that I knew of its existence, and I have to say that after the wait, the first full-length solo LP from Turquoisedeath is everything that I would personally hope for it to be. It completely lives up to what has been released in the past from the project, and more than that, it completely delivers on all of the potential that has been implied in the past from EPs and singles and collaborations alike. Interestingly, I actually do think that there is a case to be made here that C'est Bueno is maybe the most atmosphere-focused thing that Turquoisedeath has put out to date. He's always had a bit of a leaning towards creating, as I've mentioned before, ambience-focused projects, but nonetheless, I really feel like this album just goes the extra mile. Obviously, a lot of those more energetic moments are still here. They are far from gone. Again, all of those breakbeat influences are still here. All of those more jungle-based influences are still here. But nonetheless, there's still this layer of shoegaze over absolutely everything that constantly makes for a very dense, emotional, and atmospheric listen. And because of that, I kind of love it. It makes it this record with this sort of constant, lush, ethereal feel to it, even in some of its more bombastic moments conceptually. That being said, I also don't really think that the term wall of sound or any sort of Phil Spectorisms would be appropriate to really compare this album to in any way. It just doesn't seem like it's an accurate descriptor for what this record contains. I would mainly say that just because the term wall of sound or any adjacent terms that you could use to describe that particular sonic aesthetic would imply that the entirety of this record in particular relies on a singular sound throughout its entire 50-minute runtime, and that's just simply not true. There's a huge amount of sonic versatility here. Sure, you could argue that every single song on this record is heavily influenced by the same sounds, under the same musical umbrella, if that's what you want to call it, but nonetheless, I would still argue that there is a hugely diverse sonic palette at play here from song to song. Every single cut has its own distinct identity despite being a consistently dense album. Practically the entirety of C'est Bueno as a record is structured around the entire concept of musical evolution, and that can be said about every single song here, every single minute even. That goes for songs like Guessabelle, with the sort of very dramatic soaring synths kind of layered in the background over these really intense breakbeats, to the more climactic and epic moments of songs like Starfields, which are almost downright deafening in the best way possible. Seeing Turquoisedeath take this album as an opportunity to further lean into those atmospheric tendencies while still maintaining a large degree at that, of sonic versatility, continuing to really have different takes on that nocturnal yet intense sort of ethereal tone and vibe from song to song, it's really a brilliant, wonderful thing to bear witness to. And again, it's a continuation of all of the promise and all of the potential that was shown on those previous EPs that have been released over the course of the past couple of years. At that, the transitions from track to track are remarkably fluid and very flush sounding as well, which is something that I really love for an album like this. I mean, really, although Se Bueno is definitely an album that plays around with a variety of different sounds and sounds adjacent to certain sounds within the field of electronic music, as well as the field of dreamy alternative music, something that really does kind of add to the flexibility of Turquoise Death as both a musician and composer and even producer. I really do think that there is a sense of singularity from track to track. Not so much that songs aren't given their own unique identities, they absolutely are, but enough that it feels like a whole album. It feels like an album in the truest sense of the term. I mean, the way that the album manages to just effortlessly and smoothly transition between these massive walls of noise and some moments that I would just downright call ambient through and through is genuinely impressive and at times just downright transcendent in how well it ends up being executed. I will say that Se Bueno is not the kind of record to really go into if you're looking for more of a quote-unquote traditional electronic or drum and bass kind of experience. This isn't the kind of album where you can just really handpick tracks. I mean, you can if you want to, but I personally feel as though the great part of the experience is listening to it from front to back, beginning to end, etc., because there really is a sense of fluidity here that Turquoise Death was going for, at least from what I can personally take away from it, from my own experience listening to it, that I really do feel adds another layer of really just quality and even just arguably context to the record that I think is sort of rare to find this well done. There's just a very hypnotic vibe going on here, and again, the fluidity of this track list is sort of testament to that in a way. More importantly than that, and all of the other potentially pretentious ramblings that I could go on about right now, the really noteworthy thing about all of this is just the fact that the way that different cuts can bleed together while still remaining distinct in their own separate identities with different musical ideas, different musical motifs, different influences even within the fields of electronic and even outside of that, it's all legitimately impressive. It doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel cliche, it just feels like a natural amalgamation of a variety of influences from a person who is extremely passionate about a variety of sounds. Coming as somewhat of a surprise, there's also a good amount of very noteworthy guest appearances here. I mean, it's not necessarily a total shocker. Turquoise Death has done collaborations in the past with other artists. In fact, if you want to get technical, their first album was actually a collaborative effort, this being the first solo album from him. But nonetheless, it still does feel kind of odd to see a lot of really, by alternative/indie standards at least, huge collabs here, but it's great. The major standout here is unquestionably the song Dive, not only as far as the collaborations go, but just in general on the track list, and that's a collaboration between, of course, Turquoise Death, but also Paranol as well as Asian Glow, and not only is that song a clash of the titans, if you will, between two of the greatest indie/shoegaze artists of the past few years with Paranol and Asian Glow, but it's also proof that Turquoise Death can really swing with the best of them. I mean, he manages to create an entirely impressive atmosphere and instrumental for all three of them to work themselves around in. But more importantly than that, not one is overshadowing the other. I mean, the greatness of recent Paranol releases, the excellency of some past Asian Glow releases, really, it would have been so easy for one of the collaborators here to, show up the other one, or maybe even Turquoise Death to really downplay the people he's collaborating with. But in the end, that doesn't happen. They feel like equals, and they all put together an equally impressive track. The same could be said about practically all of the other collabs found on this record, the collaboration with Astrophysics on Escape Your Dream, the collaboration with Broken Teeth on The Skyfell, etc., etc. There's just a lot of great collaboration work here, and although, again, Turquoise Death has done a fair amount of collaborative work in the past, I'm still kind of surprised to see it on this album in particular, just considering the fact that I don't really think that I was going into this expecting such huge names within electronic music and within shoegaze to really appear on this record. But hey, here we are, and it sounds great, so I'm not complaining. I'm not trying to make this sound like a jab at Turquoise Death or anyone involved with this record in general either. I just think it's a really cool thing to see, having so many pretty big names, again, as far as indie musicians go, coming together on a debut solo EP for one of the most interesting up-and-comers within electronic music as a whole. It's kind of a sweet thing to see, and the fact that it is just done so well and executed so naturally, with everyone getting an even amount of time on the record, everyone getting an equal amount of contribution on the record, it just all works out great. From the very beginning, Turquoise Death was someone with an immense amount of talent and someone with an immense amount of potential that just needed a really fully realized, developed project to show that off. I mean, EPs in the past and split albums in the past have really shown that to the fullest extent that they possibly could, and I think now was honestly the perfect time for a solo debut. I mean, after all, the EPs went over well, as far as I'm concerned at least, and the split albums were fairly successful, all things considered, so all that was left was just to have a really good solo full-length LP and just have that hit the mark in terms of quality. And here we are. It hit the mark. Se Bueno is atmospheric, it's dynamic, it's well produced, it's intricately composed from an electronic standpoint, it's emotionally moving in its best moments. Above all else, however, perhaps the most important thing and the most meaningful thing that it ever could have achieved as a record is that it's a phenomenal solo debut in full-length form for Turquoise Death as an artist, and I'm really looking forward to see what he does in the future, because this record is great and easily one of the best electronic albums of the year that I've heard thus far. I'm going to give this record 4 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this album review. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.